I'm going to be talking about and demonstrating how to use the Minnesota test for differential diagnosis of aphasia. This test was published in 1965, and the purpose is to be able to identify language disturbances in aphasic or non-aphasic clients. It's also to be able to categorize the aphasic clients into one of the 7 diagnostic categories of aphasia that were created by the author. There are 5 materials that are used in the test kit, including the administrative manual or the instruction manual for the clinician, the scoring booklet, the book for interpreting the results after the test is completed, as well as the visual stimuli, which are spiral-bound card sets to be used in conjunction with the administrative manual. The administrative manual serves as an instruction manual for the clinician to use throughout the test administration. It outlines the sections of the test, which are 5 sections. There are 5 sections to the test. The first is auditory, the next visual and reading, speech and language, visuomotor, writing, numerical relations, and arithmetic processes. So the clinician would begin to administer the test with the first section and then move down the list in ascending page number until you reach the end of the book. In each of the categories, there are numerous subtests that the client will complete per the supervision of the clinician. So let's go to the first section, which is the auditory disturbances section, and the subtest will increase in difficulty as the section continues. So, for example, the first activity would be the recognizing common words. So it tells you, the clinician, what card set to use. So which of these to use. It's telling us to use this large one, which is card set 1, and it also tells you which card in the spiral bound to find. So it tells us to find card 1-1. And for an example, this is an example category. All of the subtests are different. So this one is telling us to test whether or not the client will be able to recognize a word that we say and be able to find the picture that matches that word. So, for example, the clinician would say barn, and the client would have to find the picture that is correctly matched to the word, which would be this one. So depending on what they answer, whether or not they answer correct or incorrect, you'll mark that incorrect answer in the scoring booklet. And the scoring booklet has a section for each of the sections or categories in the instruction manual. And so here's the section for auditory disturbances. Here's the section for the next category. So you'll mark down, depending on their incorrect or correct answers, what their response was for each of the words that the administrative manual lists for the clinician to say. And then you'll sum those errors here after this section is completed. And the beginning of the scoring booklet is just after you finish scoring. This is just a summary of the test scores. And then it also has a section here that should be filled out before the test is administered about the client's social history or the medical history. Okay, so after you complete that test, let's just look at, you would continue down the list until you reach the next section. So let's look at an example of a subtest in the visual and reading disturbances section. So the first activity here instructs us to turn to card 5, and this is about matching forms or objects. So it tells us to turn to card 5 in the larger card deck, and this time we'll be using the smaller card set to go with it. It tells the clinician that the client should be instructed to match the matching object here to the smaller object on the smaller deck, the deck. So, for example, it tells us a word-for-word script to say, going, show me another figure like this, referring to the smaller card deck. And then the client would then respond which object he thinks matches this object on the smaller deck. And then, of course, the clinician would mark down what the response was on the scoring booklet and the correct section, which would be here. And then this process continues until all of the activities are completed. After the scoring is completed, after you've scored every response, you will sum all of those test scores here. There's a line for each of the subtests and each of the 5 sections. So you will summarize those test scores there, and then you will also rank that client's performance in different areas, communication areas, such as understanding what is said, or speech, reading, writing, dysarthria. And you will rate those for interpretation as you move to this next book. So this book, as said earlier, will help the clinician interpret the results, the scoring results, or raw scores. And there are no standardized scores for this. It's only the raw scores, the summary of incorrect answers, because the author didn't believe in standardized scores for diverse aphasia populations. So this book lists her different 7 diagnostic categories of aphasia. For example, the first category that she has is called simple aphasia. And this aphasia is the least severe. And in this section, it gives you the definition of that aphasia, the signs to look for as the clinician is trying to diagnose the patient, and also a prognosis for a client that might have simple aphasia. It continues on to explain each of the other categories, diagnostic categories, so that the clinician might make a more informed diagnosis. And then the rest of the book is about each of the 5 sections in the test to help the clinician make a more, as this section was, a more informed diagnosis. It also lists the normative data that was obtained during the test development for each of the sections, so that to give the clinician a deeper understanding. So that would be how you would interpret the results. This is the Minnesota test for differential diagnosis of aphasia.